Hi, I'm David Rogers. I'm the creative director for the Bard's Tale 4 Barrows Deep at In Exile Entertainment. So the Bard's Tale 4 is a fantasy party-based RPG. So we're releasing it at around the 30-year anniversary of the original Bard's Tale series, which were basically like the founders of the CRPG genre back in the late 80s and early 90s. And so in those you would adventure through Skara Brae, but one block at a time, and like the screen was like tiny and pixelated, and every street more or less looked very similar. But it was a huge advancement at the time, and it really sort of laid the foundation of what computer RPGs could be. So, I mean, the Bard, for one, I mean, they're storytellers, and that's what we're doing. And so you get to, like, some of the main characters are the Bards that are sort of carrying on the lineage and carrying on the story of what happened long ago in Skara Brae. A lot of that's been forgotten to time, but it's incredibly important to the story. So you're sort of trying to rediscover old lore and piece together what's happened in the past to figure out what's happening in the Bard's Tale 4. Also, the Bard, like, it's a party-based game, and like classic D&D, the Bard is often the central sort of linchpin for that party. They provide powerful group buffs, and since we're a party-based game, they fit perfectly in with sort of that archetype. The game's all about finding like rad combos and like character customization and progression, and they'll often be like the central linchpin to like finding some, like, I will like levitate an enemy to the back and throw caltrops at them, and then my rogue will hide in shadow and shoot an arrow, and then my Bard will reset everyone's cooldown and we'll do it all again. And so they really just fit with that style of game, like what we call blobbers. You have like a blob of, like an invisible blob of party members behind you as you're progressing through a dungeon. And then also the game's rich in music, and that's kind of, I don't know if which one came first, chicken or the egg, the Bard's Tale title or our passion about music, but the game features a really rich, wholly original soundtrack, and every Bard song is fully instrumented and performed by our team of amazing Celtic folk singers and instrumentalists up in Scotland, which was all of our songs were composed and written by Jed Grimes up in Scotland. He did an awesome job. Yeah, and so Bards, every time you sing a song, we actually took the original scores from like the old like Nintendo and Commodore 64 games, and then we rescored them and then performed them live and recorded them. So every time you use an ability, you're hearing like actual instruments going off. But you're kind of commenting on the songs of exploration. So as you're going through the world, you're collecting these songs of exploration, which are like magical songs that can raise the dead for interrogation. You can rewind time to rebuild stone structures, or knock down walls, or you can kindly ask the woods to part for your passage. And each time you do that, you're opening up some new part of the world so you can go discover it. So even in the beginning of the game, you see 3 or 4 of these like sort of weird block passages, but you sort of block them out of your memory. But then you find something that can like knock down a wall, and you're like, oh crap, I passed a couple of those on the way. And then when you do, you knock it down, and there's new enemies, new challenges, new puzzles await. Well, so we took a lot of inspiration from like the Dark Souls series of games, in that we really like the player like gaining mastery over the environment. And so as you're exploring, like everything seems like sort of winding maze-like passages, or you're exploring like a really deep sort of like dense wood, but you're constantly like, you know, knocking down bridges, opening up passageways, and like throwing grappling hooks and things like that, or burning down boards to shrink the level. You're constantly opening up shortcuts that sort of switch back or open to new areas, or give you like faster routes back to town, things like that. So we have these massive levels, but they very quickly sort of feel as though they shrink down to something manageable as you like dominate the space. I mean, it came from a whole host of places. So I think people who will like our combat system are also people who like, I mean, any turn-based strategy game, but like it shares a lot of similarities with like Darkest Dungeon, for instance. Where Darkest Dungeon, you have a line of characters and each of them have abilities and ranges, and we sort of take that into 2 dimensions, and we give you a whole battlefield to maneuver around. But I also would even disagree with the statement that it's niche, because you see games like like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone, which are incredibly popular for good reason. They're amazing, they're fun, they're strategically deep, and those are turn-based strategy games, just under a different guise with a different setting. And so I think the heart of what people like about turn-based strategy is actually really strong, and I think more people, we're making a game that's very accessible. It looks amazing, it sounds amazing, we're telling this really rich story, and I think they're going to get into it, and people who didn't necessarily know they like turn-based strategy, I think will start to understand that they do because of how we're presenting it. So we have a mad scientist, Joby, and he builds all of our puzzles, and we use what I call scaffolded learning techniques. Well, not what I called, what they are called. I'll just borrow the term. But basically, we have a certain number of base puzzle systems. Like, you might have to disarm traps by sort of like rejiggering like a series of gears to like turn off traps or open up secret doors, or you might even find a weapon that has puzzles built in, like there's an image you have to shuffle back together, you have to flow power from one end of this magical sword to the other. And you're going to keep re-encountering these same puzzle systems, and they keep getting increasingly complex, and you sort of learn upon what you previously played, and then we start combining them in different ways. So you might find push block puzzles that are being integrated in with like a trap gauntlet, so you're having to like push them to block spikes, and then you're using, you know, gear puzzles to sort of reroute how the spikes are being fired around the room so you can make it through. And it comes very naturally. You can play games like, I'm not going to remotely say that we're The Witness, but you can sort of play games like The Witness and understand how you can take a very simple concept and just increase its complexity very slowly over time. And then before you know it, you're doing incredibly complicated work that you didn't know you were capable of. But when you sort of creep that complexity up one little bit at a time, it just comes very naturally. And we also, I want to say that the game is chocked full of puzzles, but we also take a very specific approach to we sort of understand that not everyone loves puzzles as much as the next person. And so the critical path that you're going down, there's puzzles and riddles and traps and things like that, but we also look at the difficulty of those at a very different way than the difficulty of like side content. And so you might find like a really cryptic riddle and you have no freaking clue what it means, and it'll unlock some really awesome loot, but it's not required for you to play. But as you're going down sort of the critical path, the main storyline, we try and keep those fun and engaging, but not quite as sort of devilishly difficult as we like to build them. Oh, I think it's just the raw depth of combat and character progression. Like, so you have 4 archetypes, each with around 60 to 70 abilities, and each ability does something really important. It changes how you play. It'll unlock a new ability that you could never use, or a new powerful passive that combos in ways you didn't think you could, or it'll unlock new like crafting recipes, or you can use new gear. We really tried to avoid that, you know, plus 2% damage, or like plus 1.5% spell regeneration. Those like really incremental changes. Every time you level up, you get a spell point, and you get to do something new you never could before. And that's kind of part of the excitement, is like, you level up, you get a new ability, and you're like, oh, I think I have a cool idea of how that could work. And you have this theory, this new strategy in your head. And then you slam into the enemy, you try it out, and then you iterate. And with a party size of up to 6, with 4 archetypes and as much sort of variation as I described, the game is constantly about just sort of evolving your strategy and trying new things to be increasingly cheesy, basically.